I'm Veronica Dudo. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, trust issues. President Trump threatens to back out of an EU trade agreement and impose new tariffs over Greenland. Rare statement. 3 cardinals speak out on U.S. foreign policy in a joint statement, what they had to say. Defending life. 10,000 people rally in Paris to bring attention to the horrors of abortion and euthanasia. Plus, signed and sealed, the Jubilee year ends with the close of a door. We take a look at the ritual. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the feast day of Pope St. Fabian, a martyr. Our top story tonight, President Donald Trump heads to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The trip comes as his controversial push to acquire Greenland makes allies worried. President Trump has threatened to hit 8 NATO members that have rallied around Denmark with new tariffs as tensions escalate. And just today, the president said if he didn't come along, there wouldn't be NATO right now. It would have been in the ash heap of history. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports.
While in Davos, in his key address, President Trump will lay out his plan to make housing more affordable. But it's Greenland that's making all the headlines tonight.
Ahead of the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Switzerland, President Donald Trump posts on social media that he had a very good telephone call with Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, concerning Greenland. I agreed to a meeting of the various parties in Davos, Switzerland. As I expressed to everyone very plainly, Greenland is imperative for national and world security. There can be no going back. On that, everyone agrees. And in the press briefing room today, he tells reporters,
I think something's going to happen that's going to be very good for everybody. Nobody's done more for NATO than I have, as I said before.
Just last night in Miami, the president reiterating the U.S. desire to take control of Greenland.
Look, we have to have it. They have to have this done. They can protect it. Denmark, they're wonderful people. And I know the leaders are very good people, but they don't even go there.
In Davos, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen criticized proposed U.S. tariffs, emphasizing the importance of maintaining alliances.
And above all, that Arctic security can only be achieved together. And this is why the proposed additional tariffs are a mistake, especially between long-standing allies.
One of President Trump's biggest allies in the U.S. tried to ease concerns overseas in Britain. House Speaker Mike Johnson telling Parliament this is a pivotal moment.
I told the President that I felt that my mission here today was to encourage our friends and help to calm the waters, so to speak, and I hope to do so.
And as he heads to Davos, today marking the 1-year anniversary of his second term in office.
You know, we're protecting a lot of people that are being killed, Christians, and Jewish people, and lots of people are being protected by me that wouldn't be protected by another type of president.
At that briefing today, President Trump spoke for over an hour and a half, defending his ICE crackdown in Minnesota and touting his accomplishments over the past year. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
As Owen mentioned, European leaders denounced President Trump's threats over Greenland. The leader of France even issued a stark warning to Mr. Trump against strongman politics.
Competition from the United States of America through trade agreements that undermine our export interests, demand maximum concessions, and openly aim to weaken and subordinate Europe, combined with an endless accumulation of new tariffs that are fundamentally unacceptable, even more so when they are used as leverage against territorial sovereignty.
For more, let's bring in John Hartley, a policy fellow with the Hoover Institution. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So President Trump's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said he urged U.S. allies to remain calm and wait to speak with President Trump in Switzerland before reacting. Do you think a deal could be reached in Davos this week?
It's certainly possible. The U.S. wants to strengthen security in the Arctic. The president certainly has strong feelings that it's something that needs to happen, and at least as of now, he believes that it needs to be U.S. territory in order for the U.S. to properly defend it. There's only one U.S. base there currently in the Northwest. The U.S. apparently has offered somewhere around $500 billion or so, which would amount to around $10 million per Greenlander. Greenland's only got about 50,000 people. The Danes in Greenland have said they don't want to sell, and now there's been tariffs that are being threatened by both parties. I think President Trump is threatening, I think, around 10% on 8 countries, starting in Feb 1, another 25% that would start in June, and Europe's sort of threatening something similar. But yeah, no, it's certainly possible. I mean, it's a negotiation. It's a serious issue. Arctic security is a serious issue. There's been a bipartisan consensus for a long time that there needs to be enhanced security around the Arctic. There are some third way type constructs that could happen out of negotiations, something like a compact of free association, where the U.S. would sort of get an enhanced security partnership with Denmark and with Greenland. It's the same sort of relationship that the U.S. has, for example, with certain Pacific countries like the Marshall Islands or Micronesia. That's certainly something that could come out of this as well, as these sort of negotiations take place over the next few days.
Now, we did just hear from the French president that European allies are condemning the threats. Macron has urged the EU to use a trade bazooka in response, but he's also on his way out. First, can you explain what he's proposing, and do you think the EU would trigger that?
Yes, so the Europe or EU ACI, it's called essentially stands for the anti-coercion instrument, and people are calling it the bazooka. It's something that was developed in 2023 by the EU in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and it basically would enable the EU to block, or be able to use a levy of various trade and investment restrictions, and it would allow for the EU to act as a bloc. In doing this, I doubt that they'll use it, even though President Macron has suggested it. I think my sense is that there's been a bit of an overreaction to this particular story. I think the U.S. equity market sold off by over 2%. I think that's probably an overreaction. And I think you have to remember, President Trump is sort of the master of the art of the deal, and that this is a negotiation. And my guess is that they will come to some sort of a deal at some point that will enable the U.S. to both increase its security presence in Greenland, perhaps something related to the U.S. being able to gain some benefits in terms of the development of resources. That will be my guess in terms of where all this goes, but we'll have to see.
Now, there are a lot of people talking about what could happen. Is it likely or unlikely a trade war could break out between Europe and the U.S.?
Well, it's interesting because we're kind of already in one in a sense, or we've had some of the largest tariff increases just in the past year than we've seen in almost a century. And perhaps I think there's an argument to be made that a trade reset was needed, and that things weren't reciprocal. The U.S., for example, would have very low tariff or trade barriers on countries like India, whereas India would have very large trade barriers on the U.S. Since the Liberation Day tariffs last year, tariffs have gone up pretty considerably. But this is all about negotiation, and a lot of this has to do not with economics, but really with national security and how does the U.S. position itself in this new era of great power competition. And tariffs are sort of being used as a tool, in a sense, to do that. Now, the U.S. and the EU are great allies, and since the Second World War, there's been an agreement about shared security umbrella. This is embodied in NATO. My sense is that something good will come out of this, in the sense that Arctic security will be thought through very intelligently, and that there will be a good agreement that comes out of this that strengthens both U.S. and EU defenses against Russia and China.
John Hartley, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
3 cardinals have issued a rare joint statement on U.S. foreign policy, underscoring Pope Leo's recent message to the diplomatic corps on international relations. Cardinal Blaise Cupich of Chicago, Cardinal Robert McElroy of Washington, and Cardinal Joseph Tobin of Newark joined together to address the morality of U.S. foreign policy. The statement reads in part, quote, "Our nation's debate on the moral foundation for American policy is beset by polarization polarization, partisanship, and narrow economic and social interests. Pope Leo has given us the prism through which to raise it to a much higher level. We will preach, teach, and advocate in the coming months to make that higher level possible. The Pentagon has placed about 1,500 active duty soldiers on standby for potential deployment to Minnesota as protests continue.
Ice out! Ice out! Ice out! Ice out! Ice out!
The protests are now erupting in 2 church services. On Sunday, about 36 anti-ICE activists barged into the city's church sanctuary screaming "ICE out." They were targeting a church pastor who also leads the local Immigration and Customs Enforcement field office. While activists call it a stand for justice, faith leaders and the Department of Justice are condemning the move as unacceptable trauma and a violation of religious freedom. The DOJ has launched an investigation over the disruption. Bishop Robert Barron said on his X account, quote, "The Trump administration and ICE should limit themselves, at least for the time being, to rounding up undocumented people who have committed serious crimes. Political leaders should stop stirring up resentment against officers who are endeavoring to enforce the laws of the country. And protesters should cease interfering with the work of ICE." Minnesota and the Twin Cities are suing the federal government to stop a recent ICE surge. Local leaders argue the crackdown is an unconstitutional overreach that needs to be blocked. On the other side, federal prosecutors have issued 6 grand jury subpoenas to top Minnesota officials, including Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison, as part of a probe into alleged obstruction of a federal immigration operation. While the probe remains ongoing, Walz and other leaders have dismissed the investigation as a politically motivated bullying tactic designed to silence opposition. The U.S. is at risk of possibly losing its measles elimination status after a year of continuous outbreaks. This will be determined by international health officials who are set to meet this spring. Today marks 1 year since the largest measles outbreak in decades started in West Texas. Since then, officials say new measles cases have been reported each week across the country. There were more than 2,200 cases in 2025. Large outbreaks in South Carolina and the Utah-Arizona border region are still growing, with the majority of cases among people who were not fully vaccinated. We have a lot more still to come on EWTN News Nightly. UNRWA under fire. Why are Israeli crews demolishing the agency's headquarters? And thousands of people rally in Paris to bring attention to the horrors of abortion. Crews have begun bulldozing the Jerusalem headquarters of the United Nations Relief and Workers Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. The move follows a new law banning the agency, which Israel claims is tied to militant groups like Hamas. While Israel asserts ownership of the site, the UN denies the allegations, warning that the demolition violates international law and threatens humanitarian services for millions of refugees. UNRWA has provided health care and education across the region. Supporters argue these attacks aim to sideline the Palestinian refugee issue, marking a major escalation in the long-standing conflict. Israel has long railed against the agency, accusing it of being infiltrated by Hamas and saying that some of its employees were involved in the October 2023 attack that triggered Israel's 2-year war in Gaza. President Trump has suggested creating a board of peace to oversee the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. A long and growing list of world leaders, including those of India, Pakistan, and the European Union's executive arm, say they've been offered the chance to join to supervise the next phase of his plan for the Gaza Strip. President Zelensky has expressed caution and said he can't imagine being a part of a board with Russia. In Spain, 3 days of national mourning is underway following a catastrophic high-speed train collision near Adamus. The death toll has risen to 41 people, with more than 290 injured after a train derailed and struck an oncoming train. Authorities have called the incident extremely strange, as it occurred on a straight, recently renovated section of track while both trains were under the speed limit. Several officials, including the president of the the national rail operator said human error has been practically ruled out. Now investigators are focusing on a potential faulty rail weld as a possible cause. Recovery efforts continue in the deadliest rail disaster in over a decade. Marches for life have kicked off in Europe. France legalized abortion in 1975, and just over 50 years later, pro-lifers continue to fight for change. EWTN Vatican journalist Zofa Zubak has more.
I had an abortion under circumstances where my fiancé forced me to do it so that we could get married. And it literally broke me. But God saved me, God healed me, and helped me rebuild my life and turned the worst event of my life into a source of greater strength.
Noemi is just one of many women that have been hurt by the lies of abortion sold to her.
France, a country that made history in 2024 by being the first and only country in the world to have the right to abortion put directly into their constitution, is seeing thousands today in its capital city, Paris, march for life.
I was very impacted by what happened in 2024 when the president had it inscribed in the Constitution, and I would like to do my part in putting forward a message which too often is maligned by the media, presented as the banner of oppression when it is born from a desire to protect life.
But this isn't just about abortion. In May of 2025, the National Assembly approved a bill to legalize assisted dying for adults suffering from incurable and terminal illnesses. In response, 10,000 demonstrators gathered at Place Vauban in Paris in protest of the French government's plans to legalize euthanasia.
And they say, oh, you can help them die, but you see, the intention is to give death. And this is not our job, and this can't be our job. It's not possible. That's not how you soothe people. There is suffering, but if we kill I don't know if you can say the sufferer, the patient, you don't kill the suffering, you kill the patient.
One of the most prominent Catholic voices in France is Bishop Dominique Ray, who has consistently spoken out on these issues and is among the few bishops to attend the March for Life.
In the defense of life, we need freedom, not to be afraid, because some medias are very against of a defense of life, liberty, freedom, but also courage. And we need in France also, but in Europe, in the world, the courage of the church to say, oh, it's very important for the future of humanity, for the future of the church to be very strongly engaged in the sense of the life.
Demonstrators have come from all across France, including international delegations from countries like Germany, Italy, Spain, Uganda, and they are all here taking to the streets of Paris to march for life, from the moment of conception to the moment of natural death. In Paris, Zofia Tubak for EWTN News Nightly.
From Paris to Washington, D.C., thousands will gather for the 2026 March for Life this Friday, walking from the National Mall to the Supreme Court to defend life. The theme for the 53rd Annual March for Life is Life is a Gift. This year, President Trump will send a special video message, and Vice President J.D. Vance, as well as Speaker Mike Johnson, will address the pro-life crowd in person. Don't miss this incredible witness to life. Be sure to follow our live coverage of the march, which begins at 9:30 a.m. Eastern on Friday, January 23rd. Go to youtube.com/EWTN News. In an historic turnaround, the Indiana Hoosiers are national college champions after a 27-21 victory over the Miami Hurricanes at Hard Rock Stadium. Heisman winner Fernando Mendoza is the first Hoosier to claim the trophy and attributed his success to his faith and pre-game prayers at the St. Paul Catholic Center. This season, he has inspired the nation both on and off the field. Indiana is the first team in college football history to finish 16-0 since Yale did it in 1894.
Overwhelmed by emotion, and it's the pinnacle peak. It's like all season we've sometimes I've had these cookie cutter responses, and media trained response where it's been like, oh, on to the next game, on to the next play. And now we did it. So at that point, I think it was only fitting to kind of, open the floodgates, per se. Probably break my stereotype.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, Seeking Beauty, American actor David Henrie premieres his new travel and culture series on EWTN+. And the Jubilee year concludes with a sacred ritual. What's the meaning behind it? The Jubilee may have ended with a momentous rite that follows the closing of the holy doors, but the pilgrimage of hope continues. EWTN News Vatican correspondent Valentina Di Donato has more.
At the heart of Christendom, beneath the great dome of St. Peter's Basilica, a sacred chapter comes to a close. The holy door, opened for the Jubilee, will once again be sealed in a rite steeped in prayer and history. For months, millions of pilgrims crossed this threshold, passing through the holy door as a sign of conversion, mercy, and hope. Presiding over the rite are the Archpriest of St. Peter's Basilica, Cardinal Mauro Gambetti, and Archbishop Diego Giovanni Ravelli, Master of Pontifical Liturgical Celebrations, caretakers of a tradition that reaches across centuries.
Here, divine mysteries have been celebrated. In this place, they received the grace of forgiveness, and pilgrims at the confession of the Apostle Peter were confirmed in the faith.
The Sanpietrini, or craftsmen of the fabric of St. Peter, built a wall with about 3,200 bricks inside the basilica to seal off the holy door. Within the wall was a bronze capsa, or container, made specifically for the occasion. This capsa has been engraved with the coats of arms of both Pope Francis, who opened the Ordinary Jubilee of 2025, and Pope Leo, who closed it. Inside are items related to the Holy Year. The items include 2 medals from the first year of Pope Leo's pontificate, medals corresponding to the final year of Francis's pontificate, commemoration of a decade between the Jubilee of Mercy in 2016 and the one of Hope in 2025, and a final medal marking the 2025 Sede Vacante. As the doors are sealed, the Church entrusts the fruits of the Jubilee to God, prayers offered, confessions made, lives renewed. The sealing of the Holy Door does not end mercy. It sends it forth into homes, parishes, and the world beyond these walls. In Rome, Valentina Di Donato for EWTN News Nightly.
EWTN Studios has just launched Seeking Beauty, an adventure documentary series hosted by David Henrie, bringing together audiences from all walks of life in a fun-loving exploration of the culture, architecture, food, art, and music that point us to the beautiful and lead us to the divine.
What if beauty was something more than we see? What if it was something we seek?
See how you can find God here.
I'm David Henrie, and I've always believed there's more to beauty than what meets the eye.
This is just, it is breathtaking.
So I set out to search for something more. We're traveling across Italy through Rome, Florence, Venice, Milan, and more.
I like Milanese people. I think I'm going to get used to it here. I'm normal.
Exploring the people, the culture, and the sacred art, to uncover the beauty that's been speaking to hearts for centuries.
Michelangelo has found the Lord at the end of his life.
It makes me emotional.
Along the way, I've met monks, musicians, artists.
I get fired up about this stuff, man.
What role do you think the artist has to play today?
Even a few fellow pilgrims.
Viva España!
And each one has helped me uncover deeper meaning.
I'm trying to understand the mind of Caravaggio.
This is such a full circle moment for me.
Because beauty isn't just decoration. It's the language of the soul. Come, join me to see how timeless beauty still speaks to us today, and how it just might change the way we see everything.
The first season of Seeking Beauty is available on EWTN+. We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Veronica Dudo. Good night and God bless.